go. What's up, Campus Live fans, and welcome to the Attorney Steve Hamilton pregame show on Campus Live here at GolfSuites here in beautiful Lubbock, Texas. My name is Logan. I'm here with Lane. But before we get into it, I want to again thank Attorney Steve Hamilton for being the official name sponsor of the Campus Live pregame show. And if you work with them, they defend you like family, and they are now the official law firm of Campus Live. Also, before we get into that, I want to take another second to thank our community sponsors as well, Paint Doctor and Roof Master of Lubbock. Lane, here back another day. Yesterday, national championship. We both picked the right team, and today we have men's basketball. Hey, it's a great time to be out here.
Yeah, it was a great night last night. You know, we had a great turnout talking about the national championship, and then, of course, what a great game that ended up being one of the best national championships, I mean, maybe in the history of the sport. Obviously, back here tonight for some Texas Tech basketball. It's been a little bit since we've been here for the basketball team. They had 2 home games this past week. Back on the road, got a quick road trip in Waco before coming back home against Houston this weekend. And it should be a great game tonight in Waco, and I'm excited to talk about it, Logan.
Yeah, it's going to be a great game as, you know, Texas Tech travels down now number 12 in the country as they take on Baylor Bears, who have struggled this season. Yeah. But in this first segment, I want to make sure we break down everything about the huge win that Texas Tech picked up on Saturday against BYU, one of the top teams in the country.
Yeah, we won 84-71, and I think, you know, really in my opinion, Logan, it might have been one of the best games of the year in college basketball. The final score really doesn't dictate how close this game actually was. 32-31 at halftime, and then starting off in the second half, Texas Tech got up by 5, 50-45, and then BYU goes on a 16-2 run. It goes up by 9 late in the second half, and then you saw Texas Tech go on a 32-10 run to close that game, really led by JT Christian and then LaJuan Watts. What a second half he had. Maybe one of the worst first halves he's had in his career, you could argue, in the first half there. Our defense was amazing. It was such a great environment in the USA. Me and you were both there at the game, and it was just an amazing experience, Logan.
Yeah, they played extremely well, and their trio showed up against arguably the best trio in the entire country. You talk about Richie Saunders, Rob Wright, and obviously A.J. DeBansa. They did give up the points to, you know, Rob Wright and Richie Saunders, but held A.J. DeBansa, arguably the best player in the entire country. Future number 1 pick, at least top 3, no doubt about it, to a season low 13 points in that game. It broke his streak of 20 points where he was on pace to break Trae Young's record of the most consecutive games of 20-plus points on 50% shooting in Big 12 history. They stopped it, and that is a huge part because of Donovan Atwell. Man, what a game from him.
Yeah, Donovan, his defense on AJ only having 13 points. He was 6 of 17. Really didn't shoot well at all from the three-point line. And how about holding him to only 3 rebounds? Donovan Atwell, and then obviously him on the offensive end. He's one of the best three-point shooters in the whole entire country. For a guy that was so undersized in that matchup versus AJ, his heart and his passion on the defensive end, it was one of the best defensive efforts I've ever seen from a Red Raider, being that outclassed in size-wise going against AJ, and he completely dominated the game. And that honestly is really the reason why we won the game, is because of his defensive effort on AJ. Because Richie Saunders and Rob Wright, they played well. They didn't shoot well from the three-point line, and I think that's another reason why we ended up winning that game. BYU only shot about 25% from the three-point line. Didn't rebound that well because of Donovan really defending AJ extremely well, making him stay outside of the paint, taking those long jump shots, and it was just it was one of the best defensive performances we've seen in the country this year individually from Donovan Atwell.
Yeah, it just seems like Texas Tech is able to one-up their defense performances against these top-tier caliber players. We saw it with Cam Boozer. We saw it now today, or the other day, with A.J. DeBansa. But one guy that stuck out for BYU obviously was Rob Wright. And he took over late in that first half, between the 13-minute mark down to the 9-minute mark when Coach McCaslin had to call that timeout. That's really when the game flipped. But Rob Wright got into the paint at will. And, you know, that's what got Richie Saunders going a little bit. You know, him able to drive and kick the ball out. Richie hits 2 threes in the corner, one in the wing and then 2 in the corner. You know, he just had a big night distributing the ball as well. Coach Young said that Rob Wright had a little bit of a pinky issue that took him out of the game. But when he came out of the game, they could not find a rhythm on the offensive side of the game, and then the Red Raiders got red hot. Talked about JT Toppin, but one guy that stuck out, like you said, in the second half, LaJuan Watts was the difference maker. He was the ability to take the pressure off of Christian Anderson, who was getting tormented all night long. They're playing him 94 feet all night long with some lengthy guards at that spot, guarding him 94 feet. For Watts to be able to have the ball and bring it up the floor, and he was able to, they put Christian Anderson in the action, and so they really allowed Watts to get down the lane and finish at the rim. Huge night from LaJuan, and what felt like that game to put him over the top. Coach McCaslin, he's still trying to learn how to play the Big 12 level, but that game felt like it was a momentum and that season-changing point for him.
Yeah, and whenever BYU had gone on their 16-2 run, LaJuan is the one that stopped the bleeding. He's the one that hit the big three, and you saw him. I mean, I couldn't have told you the last time he hit a three-point shot until he made that, and you saw him. He literally raised his fist up in the air like, I finally made one. And that's all it takes sometimes. When you see the ball finally go through the net, you saw him not only score, but he had some huge rebounds. He's been playing great defense in the Big 12 so far. It's really just been finding his shot. And whenever he finally started to hit those shots, he hit another huge three at the end of the game as well to extend our lead. He had some huge passes down to JT Toppin in the paint where he drove down, backed this guy in, used his size, and really those wraparound passes to JT are not easy passes at all. And JT went up and obviously finished. And JT, 27-13, 2 steals and a block. This guy continues to be one of the best players, if not the best player in the whole entire country this year. And I talked about it earlier, too, with Christian Anderson. This is the best duo in the whole entire country. Every single game, it seems like they combine for almost 50 points, and JT's putting in a double-double with a bunch of blocks and steals, and then Christian, obviously, the engine of our whole offense with 7 assists once again. He is the key to this whole thing. He's the one that keeps it moving. When Christian doesn't have his great nights, that's when you see our offense struggle, but when you see him get into his rhythm, that's when we have one of the best offenses in the whole entire country, and that's absolutely what we're going to have tonight on the road against Baylor, Logan.
Yeah, I totally agree. And for Christian to be able to do what he did with the way that they were playing him, it speaks volumes to him being unselfish. And when he was open, coming off those ball screens and hitting those little bit of you kind of call it a leaner as he leans into the three-point line with the defender on his back, being able to knock those shots down consistently. But, we didn't even talk about Jalen Petty adds 10 as just a supporting cast guy, being able to get, you get 30 from Watts and Petty, you get a couple of threes from Atwell. That's all you need when you have 2 of the best players in the entire country. And Rob Doster said it perfectly on the Field of 68 after the game, that Texas Tech arguably has the best closing lineup in the entire country, because you are able to give the ball to 3 different people, and they all can do something differently. JT in the post, now knocking down the 3 ball at an elite rate. Another three-pointer performance from him, really gaining confidence there. Obviously, Christian Anderson, we know what he did. And then LaJuan Watts being able to back down and kind of take care of matchups just adds another layer. The assist that he was able to do, like you said, to JT, brings a whole different aspect to them, and then you got elite defenders around him. This team has starting to find their footing, and they got another big test again. On the road is not easy to win in the Big 12.
You think JT called bank on that last 3?
Yeah, we're going to say he did, but the way he's shooting the ball is just a different. You can see the confidence in his eyes.
Yeah, you can see him, and when you hit a shot like that, when you bank it in, and obviously it looked ugly going off of his hand, but it went in. He's going to continue to keep shooting, and if he keeps knocking them down, that just adds another element to his game, and it adds another element to really his NBA draft grade as well. But that's besides the point. But JT really has become into his own. He's been a really good defender this year too. Last year there were a lot of times he'd really struggle with those bigger guys. You saw him at the end of that game block AJ DeBansa. Really finish off the game like that. We get the ball, go score again, and that was the nail in the coffin. And he's been doing that all year. His defensive effort against Houston was one of the best individual efforts as well this year. He had 5 blocks. He had 3 steals in that game. He's just been Mr. Do-It-All this year, and as long as he stays healthy, which obviously we'll get into later, hopefully getting a few guys back in this season where our starting five just doesn't have to play over 35 minutes a game. This team can make a serious run in March, and I think that they're really just starting to peak at the right time, Logan.
Yeah, I totally agree. I like how you brought up the point of JT's block at the end. I think what really showed exactly what this team is made of, they had played, him and Christian Anderson had played the entire game, all 40 minutes. At the end, the two last possessions, you see a block on AJ from JT and then a block from Christian Anderson, both balls that ended up in the Texas Tech hands. It solidified the win in a dominant fashion. As, like you said, the score doesn't really tell the whole story of the game, but it does tell that Texas Tech ran away with this game, and they really just made it to where they kind of just defeated, the BYU hopes. It was a game that, I expected to be close, and it was for majority of the game, but Texas Tech showed that they're a superior team, and man, United Supermarkets Arena, when it is rocking, and that game, that is a home court advantage. And it got a little quiet.
Oh, it did.
At that 9-minute mark, it was a little quiet. Yeah. They seemed like they could not miss. And then you get the three from Lawan, you come down, you get that, and then later get the and one from JT, and that place erupted, and it never quieted down after that.
Absolutely, Logan.
That's going to wrap up our first segment here of the Attorney Steve Hamilton pregame show on campus live here at GolfSuites. Again, thank you to Attorney Steve Hamilton as well as GolfSuites for hosting us, Paint Doctor and Roof Master of Lubbock. Make sure you stay tuned for our second segment as we'll break down everything you need to know about Texas Tech as they head in to Waco to take on the Baylor Bears. Make sure you come out and join us. TV's everywhere, and always a great time here at GolfSuites. And as always, wreck 'em.
Wreck 'em.
What's up, Campus Live fans, and welcome back to the Attorney Steve Hamilton pregame show on Campus Live here at GolfSuites here in beautiful Lubbock, Texas. A great first segment of the sports show where we broke down everything on the BYU game. We'll talk all things Texas Tech here in this segment as well. But before we get into that, again, I wanted to say another huge thank you to Attorney Steve Hamilton for being the name sponsor of the pregame show here. And again, if you work with them, they defend you like family. Again, just a huge sponsor, great to have them along, as well as our other community sponsors and Paint Doctor and Roof Master of Lubbock that make this show possible. All right, Lane, we're going on the road to Baylor tonight, but this team, Texas Tech, has really looked like a much better team than they did early in the season. I think the metrics speak for themselves.
Yeah, 14-4 now on the season, and they're absolutely playing their best ball of the whole entire year, especially on the defensive end, Logan. Now in the top 35 in KenPom in every defensive metric, and of course our offense is still in the top 20. So we're really becoming that balanced team that we thought we were going to become at the beginning of the year. But I am a little bit concerned, Logan, with the minutes. I think it's safe to say that we obviously have our rotation down. We have our five-man rotation. That's, obviously all of them playing over 35 minutes a game. But just adding a few of those guys in there, like a Luke Bangboya, Josiah Mosley, changing up the occasional 2-minute break that Nolan Groves or Mariel Kuntalk or Leon Horner comes in. If we want to continue to make that deep run, continue to get better, keep our guys fresh, we've definitely got to have some more depth come in, because that's what wins in March. When you have a bunch of depth and a bunch of guys that are all bought in, I think that the way that this team is trending, adding in a Luke Bangboya and a Josiah Mosley off of the bench, just spelling in guys for 15 to 20 minutes a game, is going to help so much for this team, as long as they're bought into the same defensive effort that the starting five has bought into over this past month and a half, Logan.
Yeah, like you said, the minutes are insane. Texas Tech, one of the lowest teams in the country. Only 2 teams are below them in bench minutes this season. As Texas Tech, they have, like you said, their 5-guy rotation. They know who the 5 are, the 5 that are going to finish the game, the 5 that are going to start the game. But what has been the problem this season is that 5 has played the entire game. Like you said, getting a couple of these guys back, hopefully, we're going to talk about it a little bit more in the injury report about when these guys might come back. But being able to spot minutes is going to be huge. We thought when Mariel Kuntalk came back that he may spot JT some minutes. We haven't seen him much, but in some, when the games are over in the low minutes at the end of the game, we haven't seen a lot other than that. And you see Nolan Groves come in for a little bit of spotty minutes, but as we get deeper into some of these big time games, playing some of these guys for extended minutes with a low amount of experience may come back to hurt Texas Tech. So getting some of these guys back is huge. However, right now, it looks like these guys are playing at an all-time level. It looks like the conditioning is kind of a struggle, but you've seen them push through that. So hopefully, after we get through this gauntlet of the next 2.5 weeks, we're able to kind of simmer down some of these, get some guys back, and kind of fill in the postseason rotation instead of what we have right now.
Yeah, I think, this is just a theory, I kind of thought of earlier whenever we were discussing the minutes. If we were to beat Baylor tonight and say we beat Houston on this weekend, seemingly we would lock up a berth to the NCAA tournament with all of our wins. You wonder if you might see some of those minutes just pulled back a little bit. Just obviously, we're going to try to win every single game the rest of the way. But because this season is so long, it's only January. It's the 3rd week of January. And having these guys fresh and ready as we head into March, you wonder if hopefully Josiah Mosley would come back. But maybe you see, a Leon Horner maybe get 10 minutes instead of just 4 or 5 minutes a game. Having all of these wins already locked up, and obviously, maybe it might not happen right now, but maybe in mid-February, late February, if we continue to get wins with this starting 5, because they have performed so well, maybe you will start to see, I wouldn't call it load management, obviously, but maybe you will start to see some guys take a few minutes off of their rotations, because 5 guys playing almost 40 minutes a game, it's not a sustainable success for if we want to get to the goals that we wanted to obtain. Obviously, lost in the Elite Eight last year. We want to beat that, obviously go to the Final Four this year. But this starting 5, no doubt, arguably could be the best starting 5 in the whole entire country, the way that they have played over the past month, Logan. And I think tonight we're going to definitely need to see them continue to perform that way. Definitely going to need to continue to see guys like Donovan Atwell play great defense. You know, maybe and after his role against AJ DeBansa, you'll see him start to guard the best player on each team every single night because of the way that he did perform against BYU. It's going to be really interesting night too, because we'll talk about Baylor later. They have two really outstanding guards that score at a very high clip. We've seen that over the past two games, especially versus Utah and then obviously versus BYU. It's kind of a common theme in the Big 12, seeing multiple guards score close to 20 points per game. Definitely going to need to see the continuous defensive effort that we've seen over the last month and a half, Logan.
Yeah, we talked about it every show. That elite guard play is what wins games. And, you know, it definitely wins games in March, but the Big 12 is loaded with guard play. We're going to talk about some of them in the next segment. You know, Cam Carr is one of the best in the entire Big 12. We'll talk about him a little later. But like you were talking about, being able to load manage, per se, that's kind of an NBA term, but bringing it into this group, it would be huge for Texas Tech. Guys like, you know, Christian Anderson getting a couple of minutes off the bench. I think what is allowing you to start seeing that you might be able to do that, Lawan Watts being able to take the load of bringing the ball up. We saw it against BYU in a major way. Lawan was great. We didn't see any issues, no change. He was able to facilitate the offense and kind of let Christian do his thing as maybe like a 2 or an off-ball guard, you know, playing alongside. But like you said with Donovan Atwell, he is one of the best defenders now in the Big 12. And I think that that's going to be something that you're willing to sacrifice a little bit on the offensive side of the ball. If you're able to get that defensive production out of him on the defensive side of the ball, I think he has become your guy that you're going to put up against the best player on every team. I think he's going to guard the best player every night. I think I would not be surprised if you see him now guard Kingston Fleming on Saturday. I think that's the matchup that you're going to see a lot of, and I think that that's one that's going to be an all-timer because he just faced AJ. He's going to probably get a mix and match tonight on the two guards tonight. Not really sure if he's going to stick on the same guy all night. And then obviously Kingston Fleming, Darren Peterson's coming up in a couple of weeks. Yeah, I mean, then you're looking at maybe a Cole Pete. I mean, if you're willing to take JT off of it. I mean, there are elite players in this conference. That's why it is arguably, it's not even arguably at this point. This is the best basketball conference in the entire country. But this team is elite, and they've looked elite. They're now 12th in defensive rating in the last month and 3 weeks, almost 2 months performance. That's what you expect from a Grant McCaslin team. And this team has no problem scoring the basketball, and they never will have problems scoring the basketball. But we saw when they played Houston, they can play that kind of game in the mid to upper 60s. They can win games at 80+. I think that that's one thing we saw last year that team been able to do, and that team has those same characteristics.
Yeah, and Donovan Atwell too. Even though he isn't, he's only about 6'4", 6'5", he's really long. His wingspan's really long, and you saw when he was guarding AJ, he was contesting those shots. He even got close to blocking a few of them. So even though that he might be technically a smaller guy out there guarding guys that are as big as AJ, that are 6'10", 6'11", he is the wingspan to keep him in front of him because he's a solid guy too. He's not very skinny, like some guards we've had in the past here at Texas Tech. He's filled out and he has a long wingspan where he's able to guard these bigger guys like AJ. And I think too, we talked about it a few weeks ago and seeing more offensive success. I think it was before Colorado. It's getting Donovan in the high ball screens where it's so hard to double team Christian because he's one of the best 3-point shooters in the country. If you try to double team him, Donovan Atwell's right there, and he's another one of the best 3-point shooters in the country. So continuing to see those new offensive sets that we're seeing, I think also too we saw it, at points in this year, but seeing Lawan Watts in the post, making plays, making passes out of the post, that's what you miss from losing Darian Williams. That's something he did so well over the past few years, and I think that's something that's got to continue. Like you said, taking the load off of Christian every single possession, touching the ball. Lawan has got to be a playmaker out there. That's what he was brought in to do, and I think this past Saturday against BYU was his best playmaking game, I thought. Obviously, rebounding, he did extremely well there too. And then just continuing to give his effort on the defensive end, especially tonight against maybe the two of the best guards in the Big 12, especially with Carr. He can light it up. He shoots 44% from three. Obviously, we'll touch on them in a second later, but it's going to be a tough matchup tonight, Logan.
Yeah, I 100% agree. Like you said, we've talked from the first week. Lawan Watts is an X factor for this team. this team will go as far as Lawan Watts goes because you know what you're getting out of the main two guys every single night. You're expecting at 40 points from those two minimum. If you can get 15 points from Lawan Watts and maybe 4 assists, I think that night is going to win you 90% of the basketball games you're playing, unless you're facing a red hot team, that you see in March. But this team has it all. And one thing that sticks out is the lack of turnovers. I think last year you saw this team didn't turn the ball over a lot. Elijah Hawkins really kept the game at bay. This year, they're averaging below 10 turnovers per game, and that's going to win you a lot of games, especially with the talent they have on that side of the basketball.
Yeah, and that'll kind of move us, really into the nitty-gritty of this game. We were talking about it earlier with some of our injuries. We're going to go ahead and knock out our injury report segment. Fans, it's time for this week's injury report presented by the Exceptional Community Hospital. And before we hop into the injury report, we just want to take a moment to recognize the Exceptional Community Hospital as a proud sponsor of Campus Live. And be sure to visit their 24/7 state-of-the-art hospital and ER located at 6401 Spur 327 in Lubbock. They accept all insurances and have short ER wait times. And once again, the Exceptional Community Hospital is proud to support this week's injury report on Campus Live. Logan, obviously we know Josiah Mosley, Luke Bangboye, now Jazz Henderson showing up on the injury report, and then Latrell Hoover going to be a redshirt this year. We know those 4 guys are going to be out, but Baylor also, one of their key contributors that they thought was going to be this year, and Jocelyn Bodo coming in from High Point. He was supposed to be one of their best big men. He was one of the best rebounders in the country last year for High Point, broke his arm in the preseason. I think that's part of the reason why they've struggled so much throughout this year, especially on the defensive end. But JT might be the biggest guy out there tonight. Obviously, James Najee coming in from the G League. We'll talk about him later too. But a bunch of big guys out in this game. Obviously, for Texas Tech, we need some of those guys back here soon, Logan.
Yeah, 100%. You saw the pregame videos of Josiah Mosley looking like he is one step away from coming back. Reports are, he's between 10 and 14 days away, trying to get in game shape before he comes back. They want him 100% ready when he is to return to the lineup. Bamboye, we're super close. It looks like, I heard reports. He did not perform in the pregame festivities against BYU. Not sure if he is tonight. He's out, obviously. It seems like him, another guy, is probably about 2 weeks away from returning. Those 2 guys, when they come back, Texas Tech is at full strength. That's when we're going to see how good this team really is.
Yeah, and Josiah, we were talking about it before the show. You saw him throwing down windmill dunks and catching alley-oops. Like, obviously the guys, he's got to be close to coming back. And he's a piece that we really need. I don't know if a lot of people expected much when he came in. He was a guy that out of Villanova was only averaging like 2 points per game. But coming out of high school, he was a very high 4-star recruit that Coach McCasson wanted really bad whenever he declared to go to Villanova. And he's a really athletic guy. He's a guy that can spread it from the three-point line when he's out there. He's a long defender. He can rebound the ball extremely well, and he's a playmaker. He's a guy that we desperately need back, especially for rebounding. Obviously we got by with it this past Saturday against BYU. Lawan, JT, all those guys, they rebounded extremely well. But adding in another piece so JT doesn't have to manage the load all game long and all season long, having him, and then obviously hopefully Luke Bangboye come back within the next few weeks. Hopefully we really need it, Logan.
Yeah, we need Josiah Mosley back. We need Bamboye back. Yeah, this team, they're playing really well. Again, I think I talked about it when Akumtat came in. The chemistry is going to be the biggest factor when these guys do come back. You've built a lot of chemistry with that starting 5. Those guys play with each other really well. How does factoring in 2 of these guys that take out arguably your 2 best players out? 2 of your 3 best players, because Bamboye and Mosley are probably going to get subbed out for Watts and JT more than likely, unless you move everybody up and put Watts at the 3. But it's going to be very interesting to see how long it takes for them to kind of get back into themselves. I think it's going to be very interesting, but I'd rather have them than not have them.
Absolutely.
And that's going to wrap things up here for our second segment of the Attorney Steve Hamilton pregame show on Campus Live here at GolfSuites. Again, another huge thank you to Attorney Steve Hamilton, as well as Paint Doctor and Roof Master of Lubbock. Make sure y'all come out. Great drink deals here. TVs galore, man. Come out and enjoy as Texas Tech, the number 12 team in the country, travels to Waco, Texas to take on the Baylor Bears. And as always, wreck 'em.
Wreck 'em.
What's up, Campus Live fans, and welcome back to the Attorney Steve Hamilton pregame show on Campus Live here at GolfSuites. We had two great segments already. We talked all things Texas Tech. Now we're going to talk about all things Baylor in this segment. But before we hop into that, again, I want to thank Attorney Stephen Hamilton for being the name sponsor of the pregame show. Again, when you work with them, they defend you like family. They are now the official law firm of Campus Live. Also, I want to shout out our community partners as well. Thank you to Paint Doctor as well as Roof Master of Lubbock for making this show possible. We're going to break down Baylor, and they're an interesting team, to say the least. They have a lot of talent. They've lost every single scholarship player last year, a brand new team coming in this year, and they've struggled mightily in Big 12 play.
Yeah, they're 11-6 this year, and really their best win is versus probably San Diego State, Logan, and that's, not really saying too much. San Diego State's a great program. Obviously, went to the national championship a few years ago, but that was kind of an anomaly. That was a weird March Madness. A really high seeds got into that championship game. But a lot of their losses this year, like to Houston, Iowa State, St. John's, and Kansas, they really were not that competitive at all. They lost almost every single one of those by double digits. And I'm not sure, not saying this won't be a competitive matchup, obviously, versus Texas Tech, because Scott Drew is one of the best coaches in the whole entire country. And him and Coach McCasland are really close. They kind of got that friendship rivalry. Every time we play Baylor, it seems in every sport we have a close game. But really, Coach Drew's teams, especially in like 2020, 2021 when they won the national championship, were just so much more talented. And it was really pre-NIL era. You're seeing some of these programs, really, Baylor, they're not as bought in as programs like Texas Tech, Texas or A&M in the state of Texas. And like you said, lost every single scholarship player last year, lost Rob Wright in conference to BYU. Now he's one of the best guards in the whole entire country. They're just really not as talented as they were in the past few years. And obviously they won a national championship about 5 years ago, but Baylor just has kind of struggled to keep their top guys in, not even just in basketball, in football as well. It just seems, even though that they are known as kind of a school with more money, it seems like with the smaller alumni base that Baylor has, they just don't seem as bought into this era, and that's why you're seeing teams like Baylor lose every single scholarship player that they had from the year before, Logan.
Yeah, and we're speaking on that, it seemed like they lost all those players. They put all that money into Rob Wright. Reports say he signed the contract with Baylor. A couple of days later, he's in the portal and he's heading to Provo to play for BYU and Coach Young over there. And like you said, he's one of the best point guards in the entire country. They did bring in a couple of pieces they thought would keep them competitive in the Big 12. Obviously, Cameron Carr is obviously their leader and their best player. He shoots, like you said, over 44% from the three-point line. He is an elite guard. This team does not have a problem scoring points. They're top 20 nationally in scoring points. Their defense, on the other hand, they give up almost 77 points a game. That's in the lower part of the Big 12 conference. They haven't played well in the Big 12. They've given up, and they've been ran off the floor a couple of times so far in Big 12 play. I think that's something that, is not seen in Baylor, with Baylor basketball in the past. Yeah. You really see them as one of the top echelon teams every single year. Bringing in James Najee sparked a lot of controversy all over the internet as a guy that had actually been selected in the NBA draft. He hasn't really shown a lot and produced a lot since coming back, but obviously a guy with NBA potential, so that's a guy to look out for, in the post as well. But this team, they have to play together because they only have one. They do have two guards that help, but Cam Carr is where they'll go. They'll go as far as he does.
Yeah, and they're kind of similar, when we broke down Utah on the podcast last week, they're kind of in a similar way to how Terrence Brown and Don McHenry really are the whole team for Utah. They're two guards, and then it's kind of a similar way to how Baylor is, obviously with Cameron Carr and then Tunde Yesufu, both averaging close to 20 points per game. Cameron Carr averaging 21 points per game, and then Yesufu with 18 points per game. They're led by their guards. It's in a similar way to Utah. They score a bunch of points, but then like you said, and Ken Palm, they're 96 in the whole entire country in defensive rating. So they can score, but they give up a lot of points. And I think that's why you saw them bring in, it still is legal, bring in a guy from the G League and James Najee. Really, they don't need the scoring. They need rebounding and defense. And that's really what type of guy he is. That's why he was in the NBA. He
got drafted in the NBA.
Yeah, got drafted and literally was in the NBA and somehow is in college basketball. But that's a whole different conversation. But he's not the most talented offensive guy, but like I said, he was brought in for the defensive rebounding and the defensive prowess. And I'm sure tonight, he's been averaging about 15 minutes per game in the 5 games he's played. I bet tonight you see him probably 20, 25 minutes, probably guarding JT Toppin. Tonight you're going to try to see Baylor put a big body on him because they lost Jocelyn Bodo in the preseason. They don't really have that other big body that's a quality of a player to hang with, if he even can hang with JT Toppin. It seems like no one really can. But it should be an interesting matchup, Logan. And Baylor, even though that they have not played very well this year, they still are a team that, like you said, Scott Drew, he has an eye for talent everywhere across the country. It seems like he always brings in really talented freshmen, just like Carr, just like Yesufu. And it should be an interesting matchup as they do have one of the top offenses in the whole entire country.
Yeah, those two guys are elite. A guy that stands out is Obi Agdman, who was a huge Texas Tech target coming out of the portal, coming from Wyoming over, and he ends up at Baylor. He was one of the top three-point shooters heading into the portal, but he is more of their playmaker this year, as he's averaging just under 4 assists a game. He's the guy that tries to get the ball to these playmakers and not make them just ISO ball all day long, which these guys do incredibly well. Yesufu, obviously one of the top freshmen out of high school, big 5-star coming out of high school, now one of the top players in the Big 12 Conference, another guy who has a first-round grade heading into the NBA draft next year. They like you said, Scott Drew brings in talent like no other coach with what we talked about, limited resources now, and he's still able to recruit at a high level. But you can't expect a lot when you have to replace every single guy on your roster. It's just not a recipe for success. Texas Tech on the opposite side bring back their 2 best, and then they replace them with guys around them that fit. They had to start from scratch, and he's done a good enough job to make them competitive in this game. But right now, they're probably out of the tournament and right on that brink of trying to get on the bubble. This would be a huge win for their resume to help them push them towards the bubble. However, I think Texas Tech is just much more talented in almost every spot. I'm thinking that this team is going to have a hard time scoring on Texas Tech, at least in the way they're playing defense now.
Yeah, and those Baylor teams, that you think of from the late 2010s, early 2020 era, that obviously they won the national championship. They would go far every single year. It seemed like a lot of those teams had guys. They were filled with 4th and 5th year seniors. Davion Mitchell, that's a big NBA guy, and all those guys that were on those teams. Those were the type of programs that what used to kill it pre-NIL. Now you're seeing, obviously, these guys come in as freshmen. They want to play. They want to get paid. And it's really hurt programs like Baylor that are really more developmental programs. And even though Scott Drew is as good of a coach as he is, they've really taken a hit in the NIL area. And I think that you saw that this offseason. But obviously, they have found their footing in the scoring department. As far as the defensive department goes, we'll see as they have a matchup tonight against one of the best offenses in the whole entire country in Texas Tech. And like you said, Logan, obviously we'll touch into it later, but they're going to be desperate tonight. If they don't win this game, I think it's really a long shot that they get into the tournament. So we could be, getting their Hail Mary game tonight, especially, Scott Drew, like I said earlier, really familiar with Coach McCaslin. They know, obviously, Coach McCaslin coached with Scott Drew. It should be a really interesting matchup, and I'm excited to see it, Logan.
Yeah, like you talked about at the beginning of the segment, the Butt Bowl is always something that brings it out of teams. What? I'm just gonna throw that in there and act like it is. Come on, guys! Our producer's back here laughing so hard that it threw me off my subject, man. I was gonna come on. But Baylor and Texas Tech, you see it in football. They always they always play their best game against Texas Tech. They've actually played Texas Tech and beat them, the last couple of years. Obviously, we didn't play them in football this year, which I think Texas Tech would have dominated. Seems like they dominated anybody in the Big 12. But in basketball here, they've always played us really tough. And so I think that this game is going to be a really good one. It's going to be an exciting game. I think it's going to be something that you look out for and you see at the end of the day, you're like, dang, that game was a lot closer than you would have thought when you see number 12 taking on a team that has struggled as much as Baylor has. So I'm really excited to watch this one. And so I think it's going to be fun. I think it's going to be a fun one.
Absolutely, Logan.
That's going to wrap up our third segment here of the Attorney Steve Hamilton pregame show on Campus Live. A big thank you to our host here at GolfSuites. Come out and enjoy some drinks, TV as well. Thank you to our partners at Paint Doctor as well as Roofmaster of Lubbock that make this show possible. Without them, this show is not possible. We're not here. It's going to be a great game, but make sure you tune into our last segment where we are going to break down our pathway to victory as well as our predictions. It should be a fun segment, or maybe a couple of surprises here and there, maybe. Make sure y'all stay tuned, and as always, wreck 'em.
Wreck 'em.
What's up, Campus Live fans, and welcome back to the Attorney Steve Hamilton pregame show on Campus Live here at Golf Suites here in Lubbock, Texas. We had 3 great segments already, but this one's probably going to be the best one of them all. Again, before we get into it, another huge thanks to Attorney Steve Hamilton for being the name sponsor of the pregame show on Campus Live. And remember that when you work with them, they defend you like family. Again, they are the official law firm of Campus Live, and we're very proud to have them. As well as thanking our community partners at Paint Doctor and Roof Master of Lubbock, as well as our hosts here today, GolfSuites, who will be our hosts throughout the entire basketball season, and they work football. We've had some great experience here, some great shows here. But Lane, last segment, breaking down our pathway to victory and some predictions if you want to get us started on.
Yeah, going ahead and starting off with our Paving the Way to Victory segment. Fans, JSI Services is a proud partner of Campus Live, and be sure to visit their website at jsiservicesllc.com to learn about their asphalt/paving services, earth and dirt works, concrete and gutter paving, crack fill, seal coating, and stripping services. And once again, we just want to say thank you to JSI Services for their proud support of Campus Live and the Steve Hamilton Law Firm Sports Show for Campus Live. First and foremost, I think that in this game today, Logan, our first key is definitely going to be, like we said earlier, defending Cameron Carr and then Yesufu, similarly into both ways that we defended against Utah and BYU, to take away their ability to shoot the three-point ball and win this game. Cameron Carr, like we talked about all day, he's elite with the three, shoots 44% on the year, so not letting him get hot, I think that's going to be definitely a huge key in this game, especially it's going to be a hostile environment tonight. We talked about it earlier. We think it's going to be potentially Baylor's season on the line if they don't win this game. And then second, I think it's continuing, obviously, to see our success with the two-headed monster of JT Toppin and Christian Anderson. If they continue their dominance with their supporting cast, like you said earlier, averaging in around 10 to 15 points with them, there's no doubt in my mind that the Red Raiders win this game tonight, Logan.
Yeah, I think that I like what you stood out about the hostile crowd. I think that's one of the big keys for me as well in the what Baylor fans like to consider a big arena. I wouldn't really say that, but it will be a packed house tonight down there in Waco, Texas, and they always get up for Texas Tech, and Texas Tech has to get up for Baylor. This is a kind of one of those look-ahead games, right? You have the huge matchup against BYU. You win that one. You have a game in between here at Baylor before you take on Houston again in one of the biggest games in Lubbock this season. And so this is one of those games that you can't let it be a trap game. You have to go in and be able to play your best basketball and get up, and I think Texas Tech will. And for the next point, I think it's on the offensive end of the floor. I think you need to play through JT Toppin tonight. Like you said, they're not as big as what you've seen in the past. JT has dominated the bigger players throughout the last couple of weeks. This year, he has the matchup advantage. Him, Lawan Watts, playing inside out is going to be a huge for the Red Raiders, as I think that they will be able to get whatever they want in the paint. And then you start packing the paint, trying to stop JT. That's when you see guys like Jalen Petty, Donovan Atwell, and I mean Christian Anderson's going to get his. And so I'm not worried about any of them. I think that Texas Tech has the firepower on offense, and they definitely have been playing some of the best basketball on the defensive end of the floor that they have all season. I think that that's going to stick out tonight, and I think that Texas Tech will have no problem with the Bears tonight.
Yeah, we got a little surprise for y'all. Jet, you want to go ahead and pull it?
We have a new segment here for our predictions called Jet's Bets, as Jet will break down his picks for what he has for tonight's game. Jet, how you doing?
All right. So this is the very first edition of Jets Bets, and we're going to get started. Vanderbilt travels to Arkansas tonight. Vanderbilt, 1.5 favorite. Arkansas, 10-0 at home, can play with the best of them. We saw that firsthand with Texas Tech. Vanderbilt started off hot, 3-2 in conference, lost a close game to Florida. I'm going to take Arkansas with this one.
I like it.
What do y'all think?
I like it.
Yeah, 100%. Arkansas, I got them winning this game. I think it's going to be pretty good. I think they got the best guard in this game, and that's even talking about, Tyler Tanner is an elite guard for Vanderbilt, but Darius Acuff is the best guard in this game for sure.
Yeah, and I think, too, Vanderbilt, they really struggle with teams with size. You saw them lose against a big team in Texas, a big team in Florida. Arkansas, they might be one of the biggest teams in the whole entire country. That's why you saw us kind of struggle with them against especially Trayvon Brazell at the end of that game. I think he has a huge night tonight against Vanderbilt. Give me Arkansas to cover as well. I agree with Jet, 84-78.
Ooh, that was a close one. I got the 84, but I'm thinking 84-80. I think that Arkansas gets the win at home. Go Hogs.
All right, our second game. Another team we're familiar with is Purdue traveling to UCLA tonight. Purdue's a 5.5-point favorite. Purdue 17-1, 7-0 in the Big Ten. Just the class of the Big Ten. UCLA is not Purdue, and I think Purdue covers this one easily. What do we think, boys?
Once again, I completely agree, Jet. You know, I think UCLA really hasn't met up with their preseason expectations. This was a team that had a lot of talent returning with guys like Tyler Bilodeau and Sky Clark, and then bringing in Donovan Dent. We thought that was the best player in the portal this past offseason. They were preseason number 12, but Dent has played really poorly this year, only averaging 12 points per game, and he is shooting 15% from the three-point line. They're not very good on defense as well. Purdue, they're a massive team as well. I will say Braden Smith is questionable for this game tonight, but Sky Clark is going to be out for UCLA, arguably their best player. I think Trey Kaufman-Renn has a huge night for Purdue. Give me Purdue 86-71 over UCLA.
Man, I'm starting to think that Jet knows what he's talking about because Jet is going to be 2 for 2 in my picks as well because I think that, like he said, Purdue is not UCLA. And Purdue did that to Texas Tech just a couple of months ago. I know no one wants to talk about that, but it did happen. And the Boilermakers, like you said, are just much bigger than UCLA, and they're going to dominate the paint. Trey Kaufman-Renn, one of the best bigs in the country. Braden Smith, even at probably 70%, is still one of the best guards in the country. I think that matchup between Donovan Dent and Braden Smith is going to be something to watch because I think that Donovan Dent has to get up for this game, because he was one of the most sought-after guards in the transfer portal. The number 2 overall player in the class got a heavy back from UCLA and has not performed. But I think with all that said, the Boilermakers roll in this game 93-75.
Maybe a little tougher one. We might be able to disagree on something. Kansas going to Colorado as a 4.5-point favorite. Kansas has kind of been up and down this year, you know, so and then the altitude of Colorado might get a little tough for them. Jayhawks are 3-2 in conference. They score 78 points a game, but they outscore everybody by 10.5 points when they do win. So I'm gonna take Kansas to cover this one. What do we think, boys?
This is the one spot where I've disagreed with you, Jet. I think Colorado tonight, tough squad. This tip-off is going to be at 10 p.m. Really late tip-off. Kansas, this is a game they're going to overlook. Colorado's been terrible in the Big 12 the past 2 years. They have a decent squad this year, and I think a lot of people don't really realize it. Texas Tech certainly did when we almost went up there and lost. And I think Isaiah Johnson has a big night. You know, Darren Peterson, he's been so inconsistent with the minutes and, like, is he hurt, is he not? Obviously, they have played well over this past week. They had a few big wins. I think Colorado wins tonight on a buzzer beater, 77-75. Isaiah Johnson has 25 points. Give me Colorado to upset Kansas.
Ooh, Lane, I like what you're thinking. I think that, you know, you've seen Colorado get up at home. They're great. Texas Tech saw that they don't give up. But Kansas has the best player in the entire country in Darren Peterson. I'm going with Jet. I think it's Melvin Council, Darren Peterson, Trey White. I think they are too good for Colorado. I think the Jayhawks win 88-80. Jet, one more pick'em. Got it.
And a pick'em is what it is, really. Texas Tech favored by 1.5, traveling to Waco tonight. Baylor's lost by 10+ twice already in conference play, and one of them was at home to, both of them. Yeah, so just what I said.
Yeah.
And, this could be a trap game for Tech. Could get close. Looking forward to Houston coming off BYU, but I think they might pull away late. 1.5's a little too close for me. I think Tech, takes that.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think we get a big win on the road tonight. This might be one of those games, like you said earlier, Logan, where it's close on the scoreboard at the end, but we're like, man, I'm so glad we walked out of there with a win because it was a tough game. It's going to be a tough environment. I think we just have too much talent for Baylor's defense. Like we said earlier, ranked 96th in the country in KenPom for defensive rating. I think we win. I think we cover in a close one. I think we win 77-71 over the Baylor Bears, Logan.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a tightly contested game on the scoreboard. But I will say, before I get into my pick, Jet over here, I think he's got the bets down. I'm going to tail everything that he just said because Texas Tech tonight is the better team on the floor. They have the better, in my opinion, I think they have the better coach as well. I think that Texas Tech checks every box. I think it is a trap game that Texas Tech has to overcome. I think they get enough, and I think that Watts and JT have that game where you're like, those two might be the best duo in the bigs, duo bigs in the country, you get enough from Christian Anderson as well. I think that this score does get a little close. I think it's 89-83. I think that Texas Tech pulls a big one on the road, and we will be ready to go for a huge potentially top 10 matchup in Lubbock, depending on how they fold here tonight in the next couple of days, but at least a top 12 matchup in the 806 for Texas Tech, man. What a time to be a Tech fan.
Yeah, College Game Day coming back to Lubbock after seemingly it was only about 2 months ago where they were here for the BYU game in football. Now coming back in basketball, one of the only programs in the whole entire country to do that in the past few years. Obviously tonight we got to win this one first, so I know Coach McCaslin, he's going to take this game serious though. We all know about his history with Baylor. I think that's another reason why they're laser focused in tonight. They're going to win a big one and then obviously set up one of the biggest, if not the biggest game in the whole entire regular season for the Big 12. And hey, if you got a parlay open, tell Jets parlay. It might win you some money tonight.
Yeah, man, what a pleasure to have Jet out here tonight, man. We've been messing with him all week about coming to our show tonight because he didn't show up, yesterday. But, we're not going to talk about that. Game today, that's all that matters. Yeah. And make sure y'all give a shout out to Jet. You'll be seeing him on the podcast as well, filling in for me, filling in for Lane if you were out. Man, what a guy, man. For real. Again, thank you again to attorney Steve Hamilton for being the name sponsor of the pregame show today on Campus Live. A great host here at GolfSuites. We've had a great show. Thank you to Paint Doctor as well as Roof Master of Lubbock for another great show, man. It's going to be a big one. It's going to be a fun one. We're just a couple of minutes away from tip-off on Peacock today, to say the least, man. Lane, another great show, man.
Absolutely, Logan. It should be a really fun one tonight.
It should be a fun one, yes, sir. And as always, wreck 'em.
Wreck 'em.